Welcome to another edition of the Big News Roundup. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. Radical left agitators hatch a bizarre plan to aggressively take over the power structure in Los Angeles and then turn that city into a socialist mecca. A leading Democrat in Texas faces severe backlash after calling for a variety of different racial groups to join forces and overthrow their common oppressor. And the Trump administration's noteworthy crusade to fix our country's broken welfare system takes another step forward after the Justice Department, they charged two New York City men with stealing $120 million in taxpayer dough. Also, war drums are beating loudly in China as the communist regime makes another alarming threat against Taiwan. And legendary director Steven Spielberg finally reveals his true opinion on alien life forms as he prepares to release his highly anticipated upcoming movie Disclosure Day. All this and a bunch more is coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin right here in Southern California, where an alarming group of far-left radicals now actively plotting to take over the entire city of Los Angeles and by any means necessary in order to create a bizarre socialist paradise. Sounds absolutely lovely. So you know, the group is an offshoot of the Democratic Socialists of America, and in a recently published lengthy manifesto, they lay out all their intricate plans in a very specific and detailed roadmap, which explains exactly what they're hoping to accomplish. Their lofty goals include relying on creatively using eminent domain to steal private property, taking over local grocery stores and food markets, and closing down jails while replacing police officers with unarmed social workers. What could possibly go wrong? When they eventually take power, they also promise to ban all Airbnbs, turn golf courses into public housing, and even allow immigrants who aren't U.S. citizens to take part in local elections. Now, that's not radical enough. They're also looking to completely overhaul the local education system to include more social justice in the classroom and prohibit all fossil fuel use within the next decade. No gas for your cars, so if you got to get around town, I guess you'll need a skateboard or maybe a pogo stick. A pogo stick on the Hollywood freeway. That's a grand idea. Perhaps most frightening of all, this organization genuinely believes that by organizing around the clock and winning a few small local elections, they can actually pull this remarkable coup off and turn their plan into a concrete reality within the next few years. Sounds pretty good, but actually I think that New York mayor fella, Zoran Mamkami, already beat him to the punch. According to their own manifesto, the group believes that by harnessing the power of the working class, they can overcome a status quo establishment made up of corrupt elected officials, selfish billionaires, fat cat real estate developers, and even the Democratic Party itself, which they consider to be capitalist sellouts. Now, call me crazy, but I kind of like this crew. And were he with us right now today, Fidel Castro would simply adore this bunch. So far, the group has already managed to get several of their candidates voted into local offices, such as the LA City Council, and they're now setting their sights on getting one of their own elected as mayor in the city's upcoming June election. Great. They can take a collapsed city and do anything possible to collapse it just that much further. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. It took a long time, but finally someone has gotten it right. I couldn't be happier. There's a great deal to take in here, and because we are short on time, we can't highlight each and every cogent point these rocket surgeons are making, but a couple of highlights. To begin with, they had me at seizing private property, and they kept me at taking over the grocery stores. Stealing someone else's property, a house, for example, and then giving it to whomever they decide to give it to, it just makes good sense. Think about it. Who wouldn't want a free house? This is utterly divine. This one's even better. Take control of the grocery stores, and before you dismiss the idea, think this through. If this group controls the supermarkets, maybe the food will be free. Steaks, chops, milk, bread, cheese, frosted flakes, frozen pizzas, maybe even the Pampers on aisle 11 and all the rest. Don't even think about bringing up food rationing, by the way, because even though it's guaranteed to happen, it's simply nothing I want to contemplate at this particular juncture. America, don't spoil my fun. I like this. Hey, it gets better. They want to free the fuzz from active duty. Yeah, no more cops. And who needs jails? Exactly. When they take over the grocery stores and the food is free, nobody's going to shoplift, so you won't need to call in the cavalry. And if you're not arresting anyone, you can turn the jails into city-sponsored gambling parlors where everyone's guaranteed to win. Part of that new city charter. Hey, look, I say there's nothing wrong with giving this socialism thing a try. And so, socialism never fails. For example, I'll pick a socialist country at random. Cuba, for example, a socialist country with a collapsed economy and limited medical care and hard-to-obtain medications. Also, food shortages, the infrastructure has decayed beyond recognition. They also have a hardcore energy crisis and extreme poverty. Let me think of a different socialist country. We'll circle back, and I'll get back to you on that one. This will just be fantastic. I can't wait till this all kicks in. All right, change things up just a bit now. Pivot to a top Democrat in Texas, currently under fire for urging a number of different racial groups to rise up, band together, overthrow their oppressor in order to take over the entire country. The lawmaker, he's a guy named Gene Wu. He's the leader of the Democratic caucus in the Texas House of Representatives. And his controversial comments are just now resurfacing after he first made them in late 2024. In a podcast recorded at that time, he blames our country's alleged anti-immigration sentiment on what he calls white nationalism, ultimately arguing that many Americans still believe that the USA naturally belongs to white people. Look at that big boy. He's playing the race card and trying to stir up the pot just a bit. Furthermore, he claims that the powers that be in our country have spent a great deal of time, money, and effort to make sure that minority groups, including Latinos, Asians, and African Americans, remain completely divided without ever realizing the one thing they all have in common. They share the same oppressor. Wu goes on to say that the day these communities figure out that they all share the same enemy is the day they start winning, and that because they're now the true majority, they finally have the ability to take over the entire country, do whatever's necessary to set things right, and ultimately make things fair for everyone. Yeah, as long as you're in his camp. As can be expected, Wu's absurd comments, they're drawing a ton of flack across the board, especially from his fellow Texans. And among their responses, that the lawmaker is a radical racist who hates white people, that he's the face of the modern Democratic Party, which is built on bigotry, and that he should flat out resign from his position for the good of both their state and for our country. In the meantime, Wu is backpedaling furiously, now claims that when he spoke at the time of a shared oppressor, he was actually talking about Republicans themselves, whom he says have spent the last half a century beating down minority communities throughout the entire U.S. Go easy on that Lone Star beer, Mr. Wu. You're starting to sound just a drop delusional. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Here's the deal. I absolutely adore Texas. They call it the Lone Star State, and think about it. What's not to like? You got Houston, Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio, Corpus Christi, Laredo, and, of course, my favorite, good old Galveston. The steak dinners, they come in one size, extra large, Texas barbecue, can't be beat. 43, and the missus, they call Texas home. And there's this. All my exes live in Texas. Little tip of the hat there to country legend George Strait. Hey, sadly, and just when everything was looking kind of peachy down south in cattle country, along comes a sad, pathetic, confused, un-American, idiotic little man who somehow managed to con his way into a position of leadership, into our nation's second largest state. Now, before you call this Gene Wu fella a racist, hold your tongue, think it through, and dig this. Gene Wu is too dumb, uneducated, and ignorant to be a racist. He's not that evolved yet. He's not a racist, but he is a coward. Telling certain groups of people in this country to unite against a pretend oppressor is exactly what cowards do. Apparently, he's ill-equipped to fight his own battle, so he's inciting other folks to do his dirty work. That's one brave soul. Fight your own fight, son. He's also ineffectively manipulating the narrative when he claims that certain minorities have a common oppressor, the Republicans, the party of Lincoln, Reagan, Bush, Trump, and others. They oppress absolutely nobody, and he's merely trying to create a political race war when he says we have the ability to take over this country and do what's needed for everyone to make things fair. Yeah, fair for his special interest minority groups. That's fair. This fellow wants nothing to do with uniting anybody. He wants only to divide and conquer. He's a dangerous little man with a convoluted agenda. He's bad for Texas. He's bad for the country. And he's not even a real Democrat. He's a stupidocrat. Yeah, it's a real word. Look it up in your Funkin' Wagnalls. All right, switch things up just a bit now. Shift our focus to yet another example of staggering healthcare fraud, which is currently plaguing our entire nation, and we're all fed up. According to reports, after a lengthy investigation, officials with the Justice Department now charging a pair of men in New York City for their alleged roles in a massive, check this out, $120 million adult daycare scheme involving a decade's worth of fake Medicare and Medicaid claims. Yeah, it's turning into a pandemic in our country. I don't like it, and I don't think you do as well. So, the charges in the case revolve around a pair of adult care centers in Queens that were owned by one of the suspects, and those facilities were allegedly used as a clearinghouse for falsified records, doctored invoices, and more, with the suspect eventually raking in more than $60 million from Medicaid for those purportedly fraudulent services. Additionally, the Justice Department claims that as part of the scam, the same suspect also allegedly convinced his patients to submit nearly $60 million worth of unnecessary drug prescriptions to a separate pharmacy, which, he also owned, before ultimately passing along that bill to our pals at Medicare. Meanwhile, officials say the scheme has been going on since at least 2016. That's a whole 10 years. That federal authorities have been actively investigating the duo for years, and that the allegations include a number of kickback schemes as well. Now, federal officials say that with this case, they hope to send a loud message to culprits who prey upon the vulnerable in order to steal from American taxpayers by defrauding government programs which are in place to help the public. As a result, the two suspects have now been officially charged with conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, and if convicted, they're each facing a decade behind bars. It ain't enough, but I think it's kind of a pretty good start. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Say what you will about Minnesota, the corrupt governor, Brother Walz, the zillionaire Congress gal, Ilhan Omar. I still want to know where she got all that dough. And the troublemaking mayor in Minneapolis, Mr. Fry. They may, in fact, be a wicked bunch, but at least they've brought fraud, waste, and corruption to the forefront. We all know about it now. And the more we learn about them, the more fraud we uncover all over the country. For now, Minnesota, don't worry, you're still the fraud capital of the USA with billions and billions of dollars vanishing into thin air. But this big caper in Queens, it's not exactly petty theft. And on top of all that dough that's been snagged, you got to wonder where the system of checks and balances were. How these two cats get away with this for as long as they did with no accountability and taxpayers left behind to pick up the tab. America has always been, is now, and will always be the land of opportunity. Afford yourself an education. Learn a skill. Take a job. Maybe even a second job. A lot of folks have two jobs. Make your way. Not always easy. And along the way, you might have to make a bunch of sacrifices. But hard work is the pride of success. Bribing others to assist you in defrauding the federal government is a kick in the pants to every hard-working, tax-paying American, and the greed is unimaginable. Also, how do you file a tax return as a small business owner showing tens of millions in profits without thinking that the IRS or some federal agency somewhere, somehow, is going to start looking at your books? Nothing short of greed. Greed and what we call stupidocracy. Look that one up as well in your Funk and Whacknulls. It's a real word, stupidocracy. Our turn now to an ominous sign from China concerning their blatant desire to capture the self-governing island of Taiwan, as well as the increasing likelihood of an all-out war in the Pacific. This affects everybody nationwide, worldwide. In a clear message aimed at broadcasting their intentions to the entire world, the Chinese Communist Party now says that moving forward, officials within the country must advance their great cause of what they call national reunification with Taiwan and at any cost. As a result, they're now encouraging Chinese officials to firmly support a reported fifth column of patriotic pro-reunification forces that currently live in Taiwan, while simultaneously threatening to strike against any separate Taiwanese forces that support independence from the CCP. Additionally, in a veiled threat aimed directly at the U.S., they also warn that they're firmly opposed to any interference or meddling in their affairs by external forces in the region. Good luck with that, son. Taiwan has a lot of friends. Maybe you don't know about it, including the USA, also Japan, and a bunch more. And be careful. Don't bite off more than you can chew. A nice message there for Mr. Xi. Now, some additional headlines we are also keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. First, moving forward, Florida will now require all driver's license exams in their entire state to be taken in English, including both the written exam as well as the practical driving test administered by an instructor. Hey, by the way, right here in California, the exam can be taken in 35 different languages. It is very complex. Moving along, a new Gallup poll shows that Americans are increasingly gloomy about their hope for the future, with a record low percentage of people indicating they have high hopes that their lives will get better in the next 5 years. Fantastic. I've always said that better is far gooder than worser. And in Washington, a group of Buddhist monks, they've just completed their remarkable 15-week-long peace walk, bringing their amazing journey to an end after finally arriving in our nation's capital after setting off on foot from Texas several months ago. I love a good walk as well. A walk right here from the News Roundup studio to the News Roundup cafeteria. And I think it's Burritos Day today. And now a quick gander at a bit of showbiz news. I love showbiz. And we kick things off today with a well-known Material Girl who's hoping to show everyone on the planet that in real life, she's just an ordinary soccer mom. Legendary pop star Madonna proudly bragging on social media that she's just taken the second Uber ride of her lifetime. And that earth-shattering announcement coming as she made her way through London on the way to a little soccer game. You know, it's great to know that at the end of the day, global superstar Madonna, just like you and me, she has to get around town. She simply takes an Uber. Difference is, when I take an Uber, I get shuttled around town in a beat-up 14-year-old Toyota Corolla with faded paint. Madonna's Uber, they say, was a solid gold Rolls-Royce stretch limo with satellite TV, a fully stocked wet bar, mood lighting, a massage therapist, and a landing pad on the roof of the vehicle in case of a traffic jam. Man, it's good to be Madonna. And in Hollywood, the most successful movie director of all time finally spilling the beans about his lifelong fascination with alien life forms. As he prepares to release his upcoming mysterious feature, Disclosure Day, the one and only Steven Spielberg, he now admits that he's always been spellbound by the unexplained, that he's been curious about the night sky ever since he was a kid, and that he's always wondered why we haven't been told about not the possibility, but the guarantee that there is definitely life off of this planet. Hey, great story, or as I like to call it, E.T. Part 2. Now, E.T. came out in 1982, and if memory serves correct, it was a story about an encounter with a space traveler. And maybe I've got it wrong, but I think we've already seen this picture. Therefore, do what you want. Spend your $15, see the new version, another $30 for popcorn, soda pop, and candy, or simply go to Blockbuster Video. Rent the original space movie for $1.99. Still, to me, it's kind of odd that Steven Spielberg, the movie director, making a movie about outer space. And with that, it's time for us to call it a wrap on the Big News Roundups. Have an awesome day today. Stay safe. If you haven't done so already, it's right there, the old subscribe button. Hit that one. And with that, we're going to dim the lights and fade to black. And we'll see you right back here next time for another episode of the Big News Roundup.